So welcome everyone to Access UTV. My name is Michelle Edhouse, and today I have a very special guest, and her name is Marilyn Bradford, and she is the author and co-founder of Right Recovery for You, which is an amazing class and obviously book. I've got the book here. That I have been exploring for the last 2.5 years, and just I've interviewed Marilyn before, and what I wanted to talk to you about this time, Marilyn, is about that whole polarity that this reality seems to be doing so dynamically at the moment, especially here in New Zealand, with the divisions of right and wrong and good and bad, of vaccines and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And in your book, you talk about the addiction to judgment and wrongness of self being the primary addiction. And my awareness is that if you're constantly trying to prove that you're not wrong because you've already decided you are wrong, how much like pulling and right and wrong and good and bad and polarity do we have to do to hold all that in place, and how much that does it create worlds? So Marilyn, just give us a little bit of a background about what brought you into the addiction conversation, and how the Access Consciousness tools have contributed to growing that, changing that, and yeah, just give us a little bit of background first, please.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for having me. And what you said is brilliant. That whole polarity thing that is even stronger now with the COVID conflict. It's brought my attention even more to the whole primary addiction and to the judgment of the wrongness of self. And as you so wonderfully put it, that puts us in enormous conflict because we're always trying to be right to prove that we're not wrong. But this whole thing, I started with the whole addiction thing for myself in 1988 when I was diagnosed as an alcoholic and depressive, and went through regular treatment and was told what I had to do. I didn't actually have any problem not drinking because I'm not actually an alcoholic, but that's a whole nother story. But I stayed with all that for 15, 16 years. And then I found Access Consciousness. And all the time I had become a therapist by that time with a specialty in addiction. And all that time I just had this sense that there's something more. There's got to be something, there's something not right about this. Because this reality is all about, this is your identity. This is what you do right. This is what you do wrong. This whole reality is about polarity. As a child, you're a good child, you're a bad child. You're a good student, you're a bad student. It's never about being and who you actually are. And the difficulty with polarity is it prevents you from actually being aware and seeing what is, because it sets up these standards. It's like a good student makes A's. That's in America. I think it's most places. A bad student fails. But you don't get to ask questions like, if your child is not doing well in school, what's going on? Not what can we change? So you're going to study harder, get a tutor and get A's, but what's going on? Oh, you don't see well. You're not seeing the blackboard. Oh, you're concerned because you're being picked on. You're a bully. Oh, you don't learn the way the teacher's teaching. See, the difficulty with polarity is that you don't get to ask questions and see what's actually going on. And this reality is just all about judgment and polarity. So when you're operating in that primary addiction, the judgment and the wrongness of self, you can't change it until you know that you can ask a question about, wait a minute, what's really going on?
Yeah, what's really going on is, and the cool thing about that question, what's really going on, is what's really going on right now.
Yeah.
Not what was going on a week ago, 5 months ago, 5 years ago, 50 years ago. It's what's going on right now. And one of the things that I love to ask people is, if you didn't have a past,
I love that question. Or if you woke up with amnesia, who would you be?
exactly.
But
Now,
you bring, yeah, go ahead, please.
well, one of the things that took me a number of years actually to get my head around when I started taking access classes and learning the access tools and applying them was the question of, well, what if there was no right and no wrong?
Wow. Yes.
And I was like, but there has to be. That's how this world functions. And that was my point of view. And, you know, we have this, well, this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong. And that's how we've been taught, as you were saying, right from really, really little. It's good to pee in the potty, not on the floor, you know.
I have to agree with that one, actually, but I get it.
And when you take away that right and wrong, good and bad, it's quite a paradigm shift required in your thinking.
Yes.
So what would you offer to people as a tool or a question they can use to, as they look at getting out of that judgment of self and that wrongness of self?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody does project wrongness or say that they're wrong, how they can choose to be present. So what tool could you give to somebody, Marilyn, who is looking at getting out of the judgment of themselves and the wrongness of self, and somebody else comes along and says to them, you're wrong, you've done this wrong, this is bad? What could they use within their own mind or their own head to stay on the out of judgment, out of wrongness of self?
Well, a couple of things. Before we get to that, I like to have people do at least an hour a day where they can't judge themselves, so that they get in the habit, or at least they get in the sense of what it's like. You know, when the judgments start, no, I'm sorry, you can go at 9 o'clock, but right now, 8 to 9, no judgment allowed, period.
Yeah.
And if they're having any difficulty, it helps to go out into nature, because nature doesn't judge. Or be with your cat or dog or horse. They don't judge. Oh, that energy. And then you start, nope, sorry, you got to wait 45 minutes before you judge. So it's very, most people have no concept of what it's like to not judge themselves 24/7. So I think it's helpful to first establish that. Then when somebody judges you, ask yourself, do I actually, a couple of different things. Do I actually respect this person? Are they leading the kind of life I would like to lead? And if there's any inkling that they're not, then ask yourself, why would I take a judgment seriously from someone I don't even completely respect? That's just their stuff. And that's the big thing, to really recognize that when someone's judging you, it's just kind of their stink. It has nothing to do with you. They're throwing their trash at you. And generally speaking, people judge you because you're not doing what they want you to do, and you're not being what they want you to be. Why should you have to do or be what anybody else wants you to do or be?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with a client earlier this month, and she'd been talking to her mother, and she realized just how much of her childhood had been based on mother's desire to fit into other people's judgments. Yes. And her siblings fit into other people's judgments as well, rather than being them and having the life that they desired to have. That was a huge awareness for her, once she started to, and by having that space that you talked about of, taking an hour and registering what is no judgment actually for me, what is that? How does that feel for you to have that space in your, then you start, what I've found when you choose to have that, you start to be aware a lot more, and this is something that people need to be aware of when they're choosing to change. You start to be aware a lot more of other people's judgments.
Yes.
And as you say, asking those questions that you just gave us can then allow you to, okay, it is just their judgment, just their point of view. Is it got actually anything to do with me?
And the answer is always no.
Absolutely. And I love that. And it's like, I've been choosing very different in my life over the last few months, and the judgments that have been coming up, being able to use the access tool of interesting point of view, they have that point of view. Interesting, I have the point of view that their point of view isn't correct, or that just, I have a whole video on interesting point of view, and I'll link it in the description below.
Oh, great.
If you are willing to actually perceive other people's judgments as just their trash they're throwing at you, rather than having anything to do with you, it opens up that space of, oh, cool. And also it allows you to ask more questions. It's like, I had several people ask me the same question over a period of 2 days, and I was like, oh, okay, is this actually something I need to look at? Do I need to talk to the other people that are involved here and just check in with them that my awareness of how things are going and is actually accurate? And I checked in with them. Yes, it was accurate, and we're good to go and everything's fine. But it was just by not taking on those questions in the past. If 3 people asked me that same question in 2 days, I'd have gone, oh, I must be wrong. Oh, maybe.
Which is not a question.
Which is not a question. Exactly. Whereas now it's like, oh, do I actually need to do anything with this? 3 people have asked me this last 2 days. Yeah, I do. Okay, what do I need to do? What questions do I need to ask? Who do I need to speak to? What's required here? It puts me into question instead of going to that solid wrongness, which I used to do a lot. And it's such a gift and contribution to be able to choose that. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to you, to Right Recovery for You, to Access Consciousness.
And to what you've chosen.
Yes, to what I've chosen to do with those tools that I've been given from Access and Right Recovery. And that's the other thing that I love about looking at this polarity thing. And as you say, it doesn't allow space for question, but it also doesn't allow space for choice. And one of the things that I love to look at is, what choices do I have here, rather than going to right and wrong and good and bad.
Yes.
And what choice, and it's actually a post that I posted up on Facebook this morning, actually. What choice do you have today that you've never had before?
Cool. Yes.
So, Marilyn, the polarity thing, as you say, with COVID at the moment is really, really strong. And I'm pretty sure it's happening all around the world, but here in New Zealand with the vaccine passports and blah, 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 there's a lot of polarity, and there's a lot of right and wrong. You know, I'm right, you're wrong. They're wrong to not choose this. They're wrong to choose this. And what's a different possibility with that?
Well, one of the things I noticed this morning, because I often read the local paper, and I read it mainly to see what's going on, because we have a lot of interesting galleries and stuff going on. But I'm not sure this is the best choice. One of the best things you could, don't engage with it. Don't allow it to occupy your brain. Don't engage in conversation about it. Don't engage in reading about it. If it comes up, just do interesting point of view. That's what those people are choosing. It's almost like looking at a battle that's on the screen or something, you know, like a movie. Oh my gosh, the red coats are killing the black coats. And I don't have to be engaged with that. And I think that's the best thing you could do. And then start asking questions. Where could I put my energy today that would create greater for me in the world? What would be fun for me to do today? What's possible beyond this insanity? So that's what I'm choosing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that, you know, what's possible beyond this insanity, that I love that. And sometimes I'm noticing that the insanity just sort of builds and builds and builds, and I'm like, and one of the tools that we have in Access Consciousness is to take that or pain in your body or whatever intensity, and just throw it with the intention of fracking the insanity that's creating that.
Yes, absolutely.
And honestly, guys, it's as simple as just go, oh, frack that insanity.
Yes.
And for those of you that don't know what fracking is, it's a mining term where they inject gas, I think it's gas, or down into the bedrock to break the bedrock apart. And again, there's a lot of things about what fracking creates. But with this, we're using that energy to break apart the insanity that's creating that intensity for you. And as I said, if you've got a pain in your body, you can use it if you've got aware of people just being stupid. It's like really frustrating you. Instead of sitting there bottling it all up and say, I just go, frack the insanity, and you don't have to shake your hands. You can just in your head frack the insanity and let it go, and use that energy to break it apart. So that's another cool tool. So Marilyn, the judgment and wrongness of self, tell us more about that being the primary addiction that can lead to other addictions such as alcohol or drugs or screens or being right, or you know, there's millions of things people choose with addiction. But tell us more about.
Yes. If you've ever been around an infant, they don't have a sense of rightness or wrongness. They don't have a sense of disturbing other people or having to fit in or being judged or anything like that. They're like, I need food. So they start screaming, Mom, Mom, you know, not like, I think Mom's tired, I better not do that. But what happens is we get taught that we have to fit in. And we get taught, generally speaking, that we're wrong if we don't. And I'll tell you, most of us don't naturally fit into other people's rules and identities and universes. And yet that's what's put onto us and projected onto us. So that you're happy and you're an ignorant. Mother has a headache, you need to be quiet. Or you're just asking a lot of questions. You can't ask questions about that. Here's the truth, a religious truth or a scientific, any kind of truth. This is what's true. You need to know that. Don't ask those stupid questions. Or any of those things. And over a period of time, even if no one really says you're wrong, you're a bad boy, you're a bad girl, they convey it energetically. For many of us who are creative, if you're fine with just sitting still for hours, lining up without complaining, doing exactly what you're told. For me, you're an automaton. You're not even really living, because when living is a little messy. And unless you have those very, very rare parents who are like, hey, sweetheart, who are you? What would you like to choose? You don't have to choose what we're doing. You can choose something completely different. Not many people have that. You're told, well, we're the Maxwells, or we're the Muslims, or we're the Scottish, or we're the whatever it is. And this is how we behave. And you need to behave that way and choose what we want you to choose. And so whenever that doesn't work for us, instead of going, that doesn't work for me, we go, oh, I must be wrong. And it accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. And it's very painful, because what you have to ultimately see is that your whole being's wrong. It's not just, I did some things that were wrong, but I am wrong. I'm walking wrong. And that is extremely painful. And that leads people to essentially leaving themselves so they don't have to be aware of that pain, and finding something, whether it's making a lot of money or trauma drama or drugs or being perfect or whatever it is, something that they can use to get away from themselves when they start to have that sense of great wrongness. And that is a huge way that addiction is born, because it's very, very difficult to actually be present with that enormous pain of wrongness.
Yeah. And another piece that really seems to slide in quite nicely here is you talk about in the book about the identified patient.
Yes.
And I love looking at that whole picture with clients, where they're like, this is me, this is my wrongness. And it's like, oh, okay, so who else do you know who had similar things going on? And can you talk more about the identified patient before I waffle off?
Well, this was something that when I got out of graduate school, I went to work at a psychiatric hospital and as a therapist. And a family would come in and they would go, Johnny has this problem. Johnny's drinking, Johnny's acting out, Johnny's doing this, Johnny's doing that. But what really is going on is that the family decides that Johnny's the problem, so they don't have to look at themselves. And Johnny's like, okay, they want me to be the problem. I can be the problem. That's all right. He's just doing what they actually desire for him to do, or her. People say, well, he's just being, resistant, and he's being, I can't even think of, there's a term for it in therapy. I can't even remember it. But, basically they're saying he should behave differently, but they don't really want him to behave differently. Because if he behaved differently, they'd have to look at themselves and they couldn't blame him. So that's what the identified patient is. And I see it over and over and over again. It's about a person trying to do what the others around them actually want that person to do and be, so they don't have to look at themselves.
Yeah. And also, people do and be what's projected on them as to what they should do and be.
Yes.
I've had a client who was abused as a child, and they actually quite enjoyed doing the activity that the abuse was. It was just done with an energy of wrongness.
Yes.
And it was that they were like, hold on, it's kind of really screwed them up. And until we got looking at that, because they were functioning from, oh, that behavior must be wrong, but I enjoyed it, but it's wrong. But I enjoyed it, but it's wrong. And there's a word for it.
Well, that conflict we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And being punished for something that you enjoy.
Yes. Absolutely.
I haven't been told I'm wrong and called all sorts of weird names for things that I enjoy in the past at all. So yeah, I'd love to invite those of you watching to ask, you know, what have I been made wrong for that was actually fun for me that I've not acknowledged?
Good question.
Because it can then, that you can start to go, oh, actually that was fun. Enjoyed that, and it was their point of view that it was wrong, and I bought the wrongness of me when actually it was their judgment, not mine.
Yes. Good point.
So I'm so grateful that you've joined me today, Marilyn. I've really enjoyed our conversation. If any of you are interested, I do have copies of Right Recovery for You in book form here in New Zealand, or I'll also link in the description below where you can buy it online. It's available on Kindle, it's available on all the bookstores, Access Bookstore, everywhere. And if you would like to know more about Marilyn, she's available at marylynbradford.com. Links in the description. And also rightrecoveryforyou.com. All sorts of different places you can discover more about Right Recovery. We have facilitators all around the world, including myself, who are
I'm going to put in here, Michelle does wonderful classes. We do these great intros, so check out her schedule and be sure to take one.
I've actually got a book club coming up shortly for all of you who have bought the book and never quite got around to reading it or have read it and gone, oh, I need some assistance with this. We'll be going through over 10 weeks, each of the chapters, and you get a week to read it, and then in the class that week we will talk about that chapter and dive into your stuff that's come up around that. So please join me for that. Again, all the links are in the description, and if it's too late to join that, there'll be other classes going on, both with myself and other facilitators around the world. So please, please, please ask if I chose anything to do with Right Recovery, other than just listening to this video, what will my life be like in 5 years? If I don't choose anything with Right Recovery, what will my life be like in 5 years? And follow what's true for you. What's light is always what's true for you guys. So thanks again, Marilyn, for joining me here at Access UTV. And what else is possible beyond what we've chosen so far?
And thank you very much for having me.
I adore you, and thank you all for joining us. Have fun, choose for you, be you, and change the world, guys. Bye-bye.